All right, good morning, everybody. We are live on YouTube, and it is Wednesday, June 10th. I'm your principal, Adam O'Kelke, and welcome to Morning Coffee, the last edition of our Morning Coffee broadcast show of this school year or fiscal year. We will be back in July. Mrs. Bionich and I our last day is Friday, and we will be back on Monday, July 13th, I believe is the date, and we will pick Morning Coffee back up for interested families and parents. Welcome everyone who's watching on YouTube. Welcome everyone who watches later. As we've learned, quite a few of our parents enjoy having this broadcast that they can go click on YouTube and check it out at their leisure. So that's kind of cool. Welcome Representative Lance Pruitt. Representative, super glad to have you this morning, and it'll be our first guest. And after we finish up speaking with Lance Pruitt, we have Mrs. Bionich, who will put on a different hat. She's a member of our 501c3 nonprofit that supports Stream Academy, and she will be giving the financial report for our 501c3. Mrs. Bionich, what kind of updates and information do we have to share with folks today?
We have the yearbooks have finally arrived. We've gotten most of them distributed. I still have a few people to get in contact with, and then we have a few extra that we can sell as well. So if someone didn't get a yearbook and is interested in a yearbook, just call the school at 742-9000, and I will make arrangements to get one delivered to you. They're only $20. And then our 501c3 still has coffee mugs for sale. These coffee mugs are a fundraiser for the school, for the 501c3 that supports the school. So come and get a coffee mug from me as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce our guest this morning, Representative Lance Pruitt. Representative Pruitt has represented East Anchorage for 10 years now and has lived in the East Anchorage community his entire life. He has two boys, one going into high school and one going into middle school. And he currently serves as the House Minority Leader in the State House. We have been really excited to have East Anchorage, specifically East Anchorage representatives and political figures and leaders on our show. As you all know, we are a charter school dedicated to East Anchorage. And so that's our home, that's our community is East Anchorage, and that's where our focus is. And so we're really happy to have our elected officials from the East Anchorage area join us. Good morning, Representative Pruitt. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning. Well, thank you guys for having me on and giving me the opportunity to chat with you guys about kind of just whatever, really. Like you said, I grew up here on the East Side. I actually spent I lived actually closer to the mountains for almost half my life there, and then parents actually built a house over in kind of the middle of the district, the Patterson and Northern Lights area. And now I live off of Patterson, closer to Tudor. And like I said, my boys, my oldest is going into high school. My youngest is, I think, slated to join you guys this coming year. And so anyways, we're looking forward to being able to be a part of the community out there at Stream in the coming years. My oldest is going, he'll be attending East, which is where my father-in-law is the principal. So there's some family connections over there that he's going to be able to join into. So we're excited about that. But let's talk a little bit about, all right, so everyone's set to start next year. What does that look like? Right? That's the uncertainty that we have. This last year, and as we were in session and we were having conversations about, this as COVID was coming about, we were learning more about it. we ultimately took some action that we were uncertain about. We weren't sure what the full scope of it was. A couple of those things were to ultimately basically shut the state down. I was in a video conference with some of the other leaders and the governor at the time when Dr. Zink essentially had suggested to the governor, and the governor was supporting her in this, to start shutting the state down. It was unprecedented. It was something that we'd never experienced, but obviously they felt, and we joined them in the support of that particular effort, with not really an understanding of what the long term look of what that would be, and that was right before the school was shut down, and the governor made the declaration that school wouldn't come forward. From there, it became a real fast-paced, let's get ourselves out of there. Of course, there was some. We have the Senate, probably about 3/4 of the Senate falls within the range of at risk, I guess you'll say, for various reasons, and so they were ready to get out of there, and that kind of moved us quickly. We passed some legislation to allow for some things that weren't necessarily school related, but were people related, whether it was foreclosure relief, those kinds of things. But then ultimately in that final budget, which was already a budget that people were working a little bit better together on than I think we've had in a couple of the past years. It wasn't necessarily flat, but it was something a little bit more simple, I guess you'll say. And included in that was $88 million in COVID relief money, for which we were able to actually get some support there for, and then subsequently basically the kind of I guess the same amount of funding, actually maybe even a little bit less funding for education than we had done last year, but still maintaining the level of the BSA as it currently says in law. So so what will come this fall? Good question. I think I think what we're hearing from the CDC is probably something that I don't know that in our current capacity we'd be able to do. I don't know that we can do. You guys in your experience, you've seen there's a lot of kids you pack in a small area essentially there, and what they're asking is financially not feasible. It's logistically not feasible. You need about double the teachers that we currently have in the school district. So thankfully the school district is analyzing some of that, but that's I think that's going to evolve over time, and we're going to have to be flexible in determining what that looks like, including being open, which we are, to returning back to Juneau and talking about other legislation, other aspects of potential funding to deal with this challenge. But that brings into kind of the, probably the longer term, more important conversation that we have to have, and that is, okay, if we're concerned about this funding, what does funding look like in the long term for education? What does the long term look like for all of the other aspects of state government? And let's be frank, we are in a very difficult place. The next couple years are going to be a transformational time frame for the state of Alaska, because we have no money. We're out of money. We have used our savings. We're still at deficit with that. We're using some of the earnings of the permanent fund as structured through the SB 26 legislation. Even if we got rid of the dividend next year fully, we would still be potentially short at the current where we currently are financially. And of course, oil and gas plays a key role in that, the decrease in both throughput and price. And of course, the uncertainty that we have from some of the oil and gas companies to invest in Alaska because of the uncertainty around our oil and gas tax. It's constantly fluctuating, and there's been a lot of pulling back because of the initiative that's out there. I think if that were to happen, we'd also see a very steep decline. Less than 400,000 barrels going through the pipeline right now is just unheard of. We're getting down close to the place where we were talking for years we'd have to actually start working on shutting it down. So that is those are concerning items on the in front of us. And of course, the decisions we have to make in November that will impact that with, of course, we've got a ballot initiative and several other things that we have to be cognizant of. So, so this coming year is going to be very, very difficult and complex. And with it requires conversations around the key drivers in our budget. That would be healthcare, that would be education. Those are the two largest, 44% of our budget is covered by those. And what the structure is for around some of those things. I think the challenge that we've had for education, for example, is it's always been, well, you know, do you fund the BSA? Do you add more to the BSA? And in some cases we haven't really analyzed, and it's not Stream, it's not Sing Park, which is right across the street from me. It's not this, it's the system as a whole. How are we operating and ensuring that it's actually educating the students like we know it needs to, and how are we incentivizing the proper use of that money? And by proper use, I mean, you know, not kind of gaming, I guess, in some systems, which I get it. If you're a CFO and you're analyzing your finances, you're going to figure out how to use that BSA to the greatest benefit that you can. And what do we do to make sure that that's not necessarily done, that we're really focused on what our current fiscal situation is, put right alongside ensuring that we are educating our students. And I think that, you know, there's probably a longer conversation we could get into about, you know, 54 school districts. Do we need 54 school districts? Could there be consolidation that takes place in some of those areas? And I know there'll be pushback on that. And I know that's not popular with some people when I mention that. But, you know, Hawaii, and I know we can't apples to apples compare, they have one school district. And are there opportunities to ensure that we've got, you know, efficiencies in that capacity? That's not going to cut the 1 point whatever billion we need to save next year. I mean, there's just no way that's there, but those are things that we need to do. And that then couples with the kind of the bigger thing that I think I need to highlight as we move into the next year. And that will be that we absolutely have to have a spending cap. And the reason I mention that is because I think if there's one thing the legislature needs, it is rules, and it needs guidelines. Just like students need guidelines, we need guidelines. We need framework from which to work. And that will help us as we go forward, and it will help you as the parents and your estimation of what's going to come for your kids, the teachers, the administrators. Because if you understand that there are rules and framework from which we have to work within, and we know that, then you will have a better understanding of what that long-term view looks like. Just like the muni tax cap, some people like it, some people don't, but it is a structure from which we have an estimate of how we will work. The legislature needs something there. And so those are some of the things that we need to focus on as we get our fiscal house in order. And that will help with really ultimately it's about tearing down the uncertainty that unfortunately is there every year for those that are trying to educate our students, those that are trying to maintain our health and the various health aspects of the state, and even into the other areas with our public safety, et cetera. So, you know, anyways, we've got a lot to look at. But here's, I guess, the point that I would highlight, you know, as I talk about this, this is a time of change, but with a time of change does not mean that it's not a time of opportunity. And I think that, you know, for some people, they're looking at the state right now and saying, well, this is it, we're over. And I don't see that in any way, shape, or form. I think this is the time where we need to adjust. And we've needed this for years, but it's in front of us now. It's our opportunity to do that and to put us on a path going forward to ensure that Alaska is it has that firm foundation for the future. So with that, you know, I mean, that's just real quick touching on a couple of the key things. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me. One of the things I like to do is I love to just open it up whenever I have a forum and just let people ask me things, see if there's anything that's on your mind, see if I can help answer, or maybe things that I haven't touched on and you'd like to know a little bit more about. You know, feel free. I'd love to see what I could do to answer some of those questions you guys might have.
Thank you, Representative Pruitt. That is very comprehensive and insightful. The two main things that I wanted to ask you about this morning was the COVID response, from the legislature, and of course how that applies to schools, which you addressed really well, and then the budget questions, and again how that applies to education, which again you addressed both of the major topics that I wanted to talk to you about. So I really appreciate that insightful look under the hood at what you're looking at in Juneau, how you're grappling with these very, very big and very heavy issues with a health crisis and with a financial crisis, and they're definitely going hand in hand. And I know that we already had financial constraints, that we were looking at in Alaska before COVID, and then with the shutdown of our economy, and with tourism industry being an important part of our economy, and taking a hit, I too am concerned about the funding moving forward. I want to say, I want to ask a question and say that first, as a lifelong Alaskan like you, I am, one thing I'm really proud, and as an educator who seeks to balance and show all sides, and really look at finding solutions. One thing I'm really proud of is how our leaders have worked across the aisle, Republican and Democrat, how I really see across our state how some of those political differences were set aside, and our leaders just worked for the greater good. And you mentioned that, you said that in Juneau, legislators work together perhaps better than ever before on getting that budget done with so maybe it's that crisis brings out the best of us,
Right.
and causes us to really push things aside and do what needs to be done. So I just wanted to ask you about that, about working across the aisle and working hand in hand with legislators and with leaders during a time of crisis, because I've been impressed by that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think that, this year, there's always pressure both within the legislature as well as outside the legislature, for you to not work with people. And what's really interesting about the legislature, and is you can work with someone again, you can work against someone on something, and on one issue, and then turn around and you're working with that person on some other issue, and sometimes they're working in tandem. You're working against them on one issue and with them on another. It's a weird dynamic down there, right? But I think this year, as we went into this, of course, before even COVID was in front of us, last year was very difficult, I think, for Alaskans in general. And I think but last year was the culmination of multiple years of not working together down in Juneau. It wasn't like all of a sudden magically everyone was kind of frustrated with each other. The governor had put forth a budget that started a very robust conversation. And that wasn't a conversation that was just magically created, right? It was a conversation that was years in the making. It was not dealing with the challenges in front of us, and it was draining. It was draining for legislators. It was draining for Alaskans. It was draining for business community. It was draining for everyone that is out there looking at what was the future of the state of Alaska. And so I think as we started this year, there were some that wanted to continue on that, and then there were several of essentially in the leadership that wanted to make a concerted effort, myself being one of them, to not duplicate that. And so it was a lot of time spent with the speaker and with some of the leadership in the majority, saying let's deal with this. Let's talk about these things earlier than later. Obviously, sometimes it takes time to understand the personalities of the people that you're working with. And of course, the legislature is so unique. You get 2 years to work with these people. So by the first year, and you're working with someone, you finally figure them out, and you get that chance to actually figure out their personalities in that second year a little bit better. But as well as with some of the members of the Senate, where I spent, I had bi-weekly meetings with both the Senate president, my senator here, Kathy Giesel, as well as the minority leader on the Senate, Tom Begich. And so we had additional interaction, we had additional meeting, and it wasn't a, everything, we agree on everything as much as what is it that we can do to find those things that we do agree on and move things forward. And I think this year was a lot more positive. So we were in that direction before COVID came. But then of course, COVID came around, and it really kind of inspired everyone to try to move some of these things faster. And will that continue? I mean, I expect next year, and I think one of the things that I'll touch on, and probably the most unpopular thing that I get, or that people will come after me with, is, what's going to happen with that dividend, right? And the dividend, there are people on both sides of that, and some of them just, I've been called some very fascinating things over the last couple of years just for stances, right? And I don't say that for sympathy as much as I say it as to show the passion that people have for it. And I'm okay with passion, right? Although one day I am going to I think I'm going to do like a YouTube deal that's like, celebrities read their mean tweets, right? I'm going to do some of that because it's just, good. I think it'd be good fun. But the point is on that is that there is a lot of debate and discussion. And so as we move into the next year, and people are looking at what potentially might come of their program that they're passionate about, maybe there's a group that they are supportive of. When you include the dividend in it, and you include other, what do we do in terms of revenue? All of those things have constituencies, they have people that support them. And that's going to be a debate that will be like nothing we've ever experienced. And I think that, in the end, can we get there? Yeah. Do I think we can do it in 90 days next year? Yeah, probably not, because that's pretty robust, and we really haven't. But will this continue? I trust so. As I know, my goal is to see us work together. I recognize that, things I may be passionate about, I need to look at what someone else is passionate about. And this is all about what I like to tell my caucus. It's all about the art of the possible. It's not about what exactly do I want, which I understand, and I have to, and I make the case for my district. It's about the art of the possible. And we really are in that place of what is possible with 40 different minds in the House, 20 different minds in the Senate, and of course, the executive, the governor, on the other side of that. One thing that I did want to touch on, looks like Sylvia, you had sent, here had asked a question. What about other industries? What are we doing to incentivize other industries? And you have hit on probably one of the most important questions that the state has had for a while, because we can't just sit there and think oil and gas has been just such a key catalyst of driving our budget, that we, what can we do? Well, one I'll tell you is you can't replace oil and gas revenues. It's just such a large, I mean, it's such a huge portion of our state budget over the course of time. You can't replace it. I mean, it's billions of dollars a year. And I'm going to use an example: mining, another resource extraction. Even with all of what they do, they don't bring in that, I think I'm gonna very much go way over what they bring in, which is $100 million. Well, we're short 1 point whatever billion dollars. So, and so just analyzing that, there is not a mechanism, and we can talk about other taxes, for example, that don't actually fit that whole bill. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be analyzing additional investment there, because they provide jobs, which then allow people to be off of certain social services, which cost us money, those sort of things. And in that sense, I think what we were really kind of moving forward, and the governor was actually working on some stuff that kind of put pause when COVID came around. But right at the airport, for example, 1/8 of Anchorage is employed at the airport. And we actually have some phenomenal opportunities. There was a cold storage that was talked about being placed in there that would bring about 300 long-term jobs. There's a lot more conversation. I know that, of course, all this has been put on pause with COVID and the tackling of the COVID, but there are different investments using our climate, using our location in the world to give us an edge. Now, for years, we've had people talk about putting servers up here, or server farms. And I get people that look at me and go, "Oh, we've talked about that for years. It's not going to happen." But I had spoken to a particular investor just a couple years ago that indicated that for him, his ability to have some sort of facility here that could process data actually gave him an edge, because we are microseconds faster because of our location than if you were to have it in other places. And so his ability to process certain data, and in his case it was financial data, was actually an advantage for him because of our location. And so he was analyzing putting some investment here in the state. So those are some of the things we've talked about for years that would require, but I think they all require one thing, and that is stability in our budgetary process. I mean, you can't have people saying, "I'm going to invest $100 million in X, Y, or Z, and I don't know what you're going to do. And are you going to come at me with something else because your need for money is so great that then once I've put it in with investing under a specific particular regime of a tax regime and environment, that now I'm uncertain because you've changed the economics of that project because you've made changes based on your need." And so that probably is the most important thing we can do, to then be able to go out and say, "All right, here's the environment that we have. What else are you willing to do up here and invest?" And I guess a secondary piece to that question would also be, there are things that we could do that requires some substantial federal input in whether or not we have those opportunities, whether it's processing some of our resources here, and whether it's refining products that we have here, and that value added that could come, whether it was natural gas, which we had talked about, the gas line right now, that's not looking, I mean, at least it's permitted, but it's probably not in the future. $43 billion, and being able to get that kind of equity on the markets is probably difficult for us. But any sort of value added, whether it's that or whether it's some of the other assets that we have, are different mining, et cetera, to then refine those products here would require substantial input from the federal government. And unfortunately, that's a pushback that we're constantly dealing with, which is people from outside of Alaska saying, "No, you can't do that," and we're fighting back and forth. But right now we're in a place where if we work with the federal government on some of those things, they are very open to it. And that's actually why you'll see, for instance, myself, this is not in our district, but I'm very supportive of the North Juneau Access Road, and I'm supportive of it for two reasons. One, because it provides a $10 million savings to the Marine Highway system immediately, because now instead of having a 4-hour ferry ride, it's up to basically a half-hour ferry ride, although it depends on where they put the final location of that road. To actually connect the road to Skagway would take an act of Congress because of a particular park, I guess, that's there. But my point is that's a substantial savings there. So that's one reason. But the other reason is it gives access to 3 or 4 other mineral deposits, including deposits that are rare earth minerals, for which the rest of the country needs right now, and absolute desperate need of those. And so the opportunity to be able to develop those, and the revenue that would come from it, the jobs that would come from it, as well as the opportunity then to see what we can do afterwards to create the value added or to refine it here. I think those are all on the horizon. Again, it requires a stable regime from the state when it comes to our budget, as well as what kind of revenues it will take to provide for that budget.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think Anchorage citizens sometimes may not have that big picture view of what the rest of the state looks like, and really because Anchorage is so developed, obviously,
right,
that there's so much potential for infrastructure and development. I've lived half my life in rural Alaska. Building roads and adding infrastructure opens up so much more in terms of economic growth and opportunity. I wanted to ask you about one more thing before we let you go and switch gears. Just that statewide perspective again. How much conversation, or have you had any conversation or thoughts around local revenues sort of growing over time to start to fill this gap? Because the rest of the country works a lot differently than Alaska in terms of what local contributions make up in funding, and we've been, in a way, we've been spoiled by oil revenues in our state, and we know that, or we should. And what you're wrestling with in Juneau now is how to fund our, continue to fund our entire state in the face of, our primary revenue source declining. And Anchorage is a good example of local revenue filling that gap with local taxes and support, from the municipality and the borough. Yet I also lived in Mat-Su and worked in Mat-Su, and I know that every year it was a fight to get the borough to fund up to the full mill rate.
Right.
And I know that not every borough in our state funds up to the state cap that they're allowed to for local contribution, which is really interesting to me. And yet you look at boroughs that are wealthy, like Valdez, North Slope, are common examples where they fund up to, the full capacity, and they have a lot of local revenue. And then you look at the schools, look at the school in Barrow, look at the schools in Valdez.
Right.
And there's a huge discrepancy there. And it's not because the state does more or less, it's because the local contribution is being met.
Right.
And then a third nuance to that is that I'm talking about incorporated boroughs and municipalities, and there's a huge portion of our state that is unincorporated or RDAs.
Absolutely.
And you are 100% responsible for funding those because there's no local tax base. So that was my last question, just to get your thoughts on, as the state, you can't create money out of nothing. We know that. What do you see as a future of local contribution filling some of that gap?
That is it's funny. I don't get that question a lot from people, but it's actually probably one of the most important fundamental questions that we have to ask ourselves. I was just with a commissioner the other day, and I'll keep the commissioner out of it, but I just was having coffee with the commissioner, and this was a key part of the topic that we were discussing, was the role of the local communities in essentially self-governance. I'm going to start with the last thing that you touched on, which is the unincorporated boroughs, for which we are essentially the assembly for those unincorporated boroughs. If you go back, decades, you'll understand that the intent was that we would have boroughs in some of these places, most of these places really, that don't have boroughs currently. And I probably shouldn't use examples of specific locations, but there are locations out there that have decided that they didn't want to be a borough, but yet you look at what they could have benefited from by having a borough there, whether it's a specific mining development, or whether it's some other asset that goes through that could have probably provided, whether it's a PILT, could have provided some sort of benefit that for which they could cover those costs instead of relying on the state for it, and position themselves for the long term, that they could then essentially have their own future in their hands. They haven't done it for various reasons, but I think it's time that the state starts to go, it's time to do this. And that kind of then relays as you pull over into the developed boroughs. And I know that this isn't always popular. And I guess, this is going to be, the next 2 years are going to be the time frame of not necessarily talking about popular things, but there are boroughs that have decided that, they don't want to provide policing services for whatever reasons, because the troopers will step in and they will take care of it. The challenge is then when we don't have enough troopers to cover it, and you're looking to the state to cover it, we just can't without taking other actions that then people might object to. And so there's an element of allowing and kind of encouraging the local municipalities to take a larger role instead of coming back to the state to fill the void. I use one example, and now let's look at our own municipality. several years ago, we were looking to change the fees for licensing your car. We hadn't changed some of these fees in many, many, many years, and that includes the fees for nonprofits and municipalities, and that hadn't been changed since I think the early 70s. And so we were making it go from I think $10 to $20. It wasn't a big change, but it was about $300,000 for the city of Anchorage. And there were some people representing the city of Anchorage that came in and said, you can't do this, you can't do this. And I looked at them and I said, well, we're running out of money. Would you rather me take that $300,000 from the revenue sharing? And no, you can't do that, right? And I said, well, but you understand my point that I'm making. I'm not trying to be a pain here, but the point I'm making is that we don't have the money, but we're filling in some of these gaps for the municipality. We can't do that anymore. And as much as I'm speaking for the people I represent, and recognizing that they would have to participate more if we decided to continue to keep everything the way that it is. Of course, that's a discussion that the local communities can have. That from the fiduciary duty that I have from the state level, we can't continue to do this, and so it's time for the local communities to play, for my local community in that case, to play a larger role. And I think as we talk about next year and what our budget picture looks like, I really think it includes a larger conversation about communities. It's time for a larger role for you to play in this. Now, what are they not going to get? We're not going to turn around and say create county jails, which is a really unique system that we have, where we don't have county jails, where the state operates all of the correction system. We're not going to all of a sudden create that, right? So there are things that we're still going to have centralized within the state, but there are so many other aspects of things that have been paid for and covered by the state, or it was just easy to come to the state and say, hey, we want to build this as a local municipality, and we want some capital money to do that. Can you give it to us? That we're going to have to go, it's not that time anymore. It's time for you to determine that, and for you to indicate whatever you feel you need to do revenue wise to provide that. So that's part of the transition that we're in. It's not a bad thing. I don't see that as a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. I think you're already seeing it a little bit with the school bond debt reimbursement, right? The school bond debt reimbursement that was there. I mean, we haven't added. Of course, there's what was in law prior to 5 years ago that hasn't been. We haven't actually provided. Well, I guess there's been. The budgetary process hasn't necessarily provided everything from previous in terms of that response. But for the last 5 years, we haven't been adding to that number because we had passed a kind of a pause on adding to what the state would potentially be able to cover. And so the local communities, as Anchorage, has decided, whatever we are funding, there is no state match to that. So we've already started to see a transition there of that burden being on the local community, and the local community taking ownership of that and deciding whether or not they want to fit that whole bill. I think and you've seen also in the last couple of years, about half of that, of what was previously committed by the state, has also been added to that potentially. And that affects our property taxes. But that's also part of the transition that you're saying, because the state doesn't have the money. And as I tell people, either it's through property taxes or it's going to come from some other source if we continue to do that. It's not free.
It has to come from somewhere.
It has to come from somewhere. So, so you've hit on something, and I apologize for the long answer, but you've hit on something that is absolutely vital in the conversation. We can't just overlook it, that local communities can and should take a larger ownership role in the future of Alaska, because the state of Alaska can't be everything to everyone in the way that we were.
It's not sustainable, and it's not how the rest of the world works, really. So
right.
We're all in this together. I really wish, I think I'd love to have you back on when we reopen Morning Coffee, because I think there are 10 more questions I'd ask you along those lines, and it's been so informative. But we'll have to close up for this morning and move on. I'd really
Thank
like
you.
to have you back. Thank you so much for your time, Representative Pruitt. It was really insightful, and we really appreciate you coming on with us this morning.
Yeah, I appreciate having me on, and thank you for your time this morning as well. So,
all right, thank you. That was Representative Lance Pruitt with us this morning, sharing some insights on our legislature, the inner workings of the legislature, and our fiscal future, which I know this is an educational show, education topics, but really affects us all. You know, the funding not only of education, but then I really appreciate being able to start with the view of education, where a lot of us are focused, and open that up to looking at the bigger picture. So the next piece of the show this morning is Mrs. Beyondich will be presenting, sorry, I don't think we have a slide for it, Mrs. Beyondich. Mrs. Beyondich will be presenting, putting on her hat as a member of our 501c3s. So charter schools have a nonprofit arm or entity attached to them. And STREAM has two boards, the STREAM APC, which is the board that oversees the principal and the school. And thank you, there we go. And also has a nonprofit arm, a separate nonprofit board called Stream Anchorage, which Mrs. Beyondich is on and a part of. And she's gonna present our first ever financial report for our 501c3. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Beyondich. Thank you so much for all of your work on this.
You're muted, Sylvia.
Sorry about that, you guys. So this is the first annual report of Stream Anchorage 501c3. The 501c3 is the nonprofit arm of Anchorage Stream Academy. It runs on a fiscal year, the fiscal year from January until December, as opposed to the school, which runs on a fiscal year. So some of the things that we're going to talk about are going to reflect the fiscal year of the school, but know that Stream 501c3, the nonprofit, runs on a fiscal year. According to our bylaws, we have to have our annual meeting in the first 4 months of the year. And then at that time, we gather all of our data and prepare our annual report for presentation in June. There's a couple of different ways to contact the 501c3. You can do it through the old-fashioned snail mail by writing to Post Office Box 212764, which is separate from the post office box that the school uses. Or you can use email. There's a couple different emails you can use. The one that we recommend is that you email streamanchorage501c3@gmail.com. Of course, you always can email anybody that's on the board through their work email addresses, and I'll give you mine in a little bit. The 2020 501c3 board members are President Whitney Diatri, who's also a founder for our school, Vice President Jen Mickelson, who serves as our liaison between the nonprofit and the academic policy committee at the school. I serve as the secretary and treasurer currently, and our member at large is Gail Yip. We have one standing committee, it's the Vision Committee. It's co-chaired by founder Andrew Brown and Melissa Reed. The Vision Committee was set up to work with as a fundraiser and community outreach. And we will be asking for people to help us in August for fundraising and community outreach. We should point out that without the people that work on the 501c3, that have worked on the 501c3 since 2011, we wouldn't be able to serve our community. There is a core group of people that have, starting with the founders of our school, that have spent a ton of time and energy on the 501c3 and its mission to start the school. And in 2016, we're rewarded with the ability to start the school. So we have to thank all of those people that have spent so much time working with our school, with our 501c3 and our school. The agenda for our annual report is to present our goals, the goals that we set, to cover our financial report, we have a few recognitions that we'd like to make, and then we have an invitation to attend our next meeting. The picture on the right-hand side of the screen there is one of the projects that the 501c3 did this year. They're the Java jackets. And we purchased 1,000 Java jackets and put labels on them that were specific to the school to advertise that the lottery was open. The Java jackets were then distributed to local coffee huts in East Anchorage because we specifically serve East Anchorage. And we used those as tools to communicate and advertise for our school. During the May 2020 meeting, the 501c3 board formalized several layers of goals, from short-term, year-long, and long-term. The short-term goals are goals that need to be accomplished in 1 to 2 months. Then we have year-long goals and long-term goals. Our short-term goals, including setting up the bones for our new website. We were still using the original website that the founders set up when the purpose of the 501c3 was to start a school. Well, we started the school, so now we're changing gears a little bit. So we've set up the bones for our new website, and that's soon going to be out. We're going to develop a rough draft of a fundraising letter, a template that we can use to ask for time, talent, and treasure from not only individuals, but also corporations. And then we're going to produce a clear first draft of our revised mission statement. Our year-long goals include being able to clearly articulate the mission, vision, and purpose of the 501c3 now that we're ready to move on to the next stage, to fundraise, and we're going to talk about fundraising in the financial section, and then and this is huge, we need to recruit a bookkeeper so that we have somebody that can help us with tax filings and money management. And then we have our long-term goals, and our long-term goals include maintaining our 501c3 status with the federal government, which is not difficult, but you have to make a few steps and do a few things in order to maintain that. And simultaneously maintain the nonprofit status with the state of Alaska, which includes filling out a biannual report. And then the huge long-term goal, which it used to be starting a school. Well, we've done that. Now we need to build a facility that we can put our school into. And so that's the next step. The website is under construction. We've started it, and it's going to be available from the school website. There'll be a channel across the top of the school's website that has a link that indicates it's for the 501c3 or the nonprofit. And that's how you'll be able to navigate to the nonprofit's website, is through the school's website. This is the section of the report that we get to talk about our financial reports. And it's important to know that we're a business. We have to have money in order to support the short-term and the long-term goals. When we look at why we raise money, we look for, there's 2 reasons why we need to raise money. One of them is debts and maintenance, and the other one is special projects. Special projects is the fun one. Debts and maintenance is the one that you just have to do in order to keep the doors open. One of the things that under debts and maintenance is an outstanding invoice that we have to the 4-Acre Group. The 4-Acre Group is a group that serves Alaskan nonprofits, that helps them get set up to establish their 501c3 status, to set their mission and vision and goals. They are themselves a nonprofit group, and the way that they maintain their debts and maintenance is by charging a nominal fee. And we incurred an expense between 2011 and 2016 of a little around $3,000 to $4,000. And we've slowly been paying that off $50 at a time. And so we'll talk about what we have left in just a second. Debts and maintenance also includes the post office box rental. That expense was $206 last year, and the post office has just warned us that that's going to go up. So it'll be about $250, $275 to maintain that post office box. And then we have to pay for postage and office supplies like paper and stickers and thank you cards. And then we also have a small category for advertising and recruitment, just like that example of the Java jackets earlier. So we also help the school advertise. So that's the debts and maintenance. Under special projects, the 501c3 board identified very specific projects that we want to help the school with. That includes supporting the cross-country ski team, helping to support the 8th grade capstone event, and of course, the huge one, which is building a facility to put our school into. We had several fundraisers last year. The fundraiser in the winter was the hats. It was to support special projects, and we raised $580. The underclassmen during spring conferences held a bake sale under the direction of the 501c3, and their bake sale raised more than our hats did, because they sold $294 in goodies that they had donated, but Wayland University donated $1,000 to them as well when Wayland found out what the underclassmen were doing for our 8th graders, then they donated $1,000. So the bake sale brought in $1,294, which has already been given to the school. In the spring of 2020, we planned a silent auction to run in parallel with the showcase event for the student showcase events at the end of the second semester. Unfortunately, that had to be canceled due to COVID. So we didn't get to have that fundraiser. Right now, the fundraiser that we have going on supports debts and maintenance and has the potential to raise $1,400. You just need to buy a coffee cup. They're only $20. And I challenge you to buy one and sell one to get one of your friends to buy one as well, or get them as holiday or gift presents. A very simplistic look at our balance sheet will be looking at our assets and our liabilities. So at the time that this report was created a couple of weeks ago, our cash assets were about $752. We had accounts receivable of $105. Accounts receivable means that's money that has been pledged to us that we have yet to collect. We have inventory of 2 hats. So if you need to buy a hat, I have 2 left. And that could bring us $30. They're $15 a piece. And then our inventory of mugs, which will bring us around $13.60 is what that inventory will bring us. That left us an asset amount of $2,250. Now we have liabilities. We have the liability to the accounts payable to 4Acre, which I talked about before. We still have left to pay them. At the time of this reporting, we had left $1,100. And then we have our previous president of the 501c3 paid an invoice on behalf of the 501c3, and we need to reimburse her. And so we owe her $200. What that means is that our net worth is approximately $950. Now, some of that's in inventory that we need to get rid of so that we can have the cash, but that's a very simplistic look at the balance sheet right now. The ways that Stream Academy acquires funds is through a combination of fundraising, receiving foundation or government grants, charitable contributions, and corporate philanthropy. Fundraising is what we've been doing. It's one of the, I'm not going to say easiest because it's not exactly easy to do all these fundraiser things, but it's what is easiest to ask people to donate money with, because they get something in exchange, right? They get baked goods, or they get a coffee mug, or they get a hat. But what we really need is somebody that can write foundational grants or government grants for us, and someone who is good at asking for charitable contributions, and then not only from individuals, but also from corporations. So if you are good at these things, or if you know someone who is good at these things, please put them in touch with us, because we could really use their help. The future fundraisers that we have right now in the planning stages, we look at in terms of the fiscal year of the school, even though we run on a physical year. The fundraisers that we have planned are a calendar sale when school starts. This will be a specialized calendar with pictures that are stream related pictures on the top, and on the bottom in the squares and the dates we'll have specific information about our school. For instance, when our STEM night is planned for, and when our showcases are planned for, and very school related things, so that when you hang this calendar up, you can have a quick month at a glance look. So that we're working on that right now. In the winter of 2020, we're going to start our first ever pledge drive for our future facilities fund, and that directly supports special projects. So I should say the calendar sales will support debts and maintenance. Then in the spring, next spring, at the end of the year, we're once again going to attempt to have our silent auction, our basket silent auction, and our super supper, and that will support special projects as well. So fingers crossed we'll be able to do that in conjunction with the showcase. Next summer, a year from now, the plan is to have specialized baseball caps for sale, and that will support debts and maintenance as well. This is a part of the presentation that I love. It's the part where we get to say thank you to the people that make our job so much fun and so easy to do and bring us great joy. There's the very first group of people that we need to thank are the teachers, the staff at Anchorage Stream Academy. There's literally not enough words to express the gratitude that the 501c3 has for the staff at Anchorage Stream Academy. Without this amazing group of dedicated professionals, we wouldn't have anything to do. There'd be nothing for us to do. So thank you to the staff at Anchorage Stream Academy for making the vision come true of our founders. Most importantly, though, our founding principal, Adam O'Kelke, who took on the mission and vision of Anchorage Stream Academy like instantly. Before we even hired this guy, he was so invested in the mission and vision that he could have been a founder. He was our cheerleader and coach. He was our captain. He's our crossing guard. Most importantly, he's our servant leader. Adam, without your vision and without the focus that you have on our mission, we would be lost. So thank you very much. We are so grateful that you said yes to this opportunity. And then a very special thank you has to go to Ms. Caroline Storm. Caroline took on the leadership of the 501c3 and the APC simultaneously when the 501c3 had floundered a little bit. And it was under her leadership that the nonprofit arm of Anchorage Stream Academy finally was able to regain its focus and strength and do everything that we've done this year. So now here's your invitation to attend our next meeting. It's going to be via Zoom. It's going to be Saturday at 9 o'clock in the morning. What a better way to start your weekend than at 9 o'clock on Zoom with the 501c3 board. If you're interested in attending, or just want to know what we talk about and what we've done in past meetings, give me a call at 742-9000 and I will be happy to let you know. At this time, I can take any questions that you have, or you can feel free to email us at streamanchorage501c3@gmail.com, or you can also email me at beyonditch_Sylvia@asdk12.org. So there we go, Adam. That is it.
Wow, that is pretty impressive. That's an excellent presentation. Thank you for the shout out. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all of your hard work on the nonprofit, as well as everything else you do. Awesome. Questions for Mrs. Beyonditch about our nonprofit. How do we donate? What's the easiest way to get money to the nonprofit?
I'll take cash, I'll take checks. Right now we're getting set up with our bank in order some other way that you can like transfer money over to us. Right now, what we need to do is just have cash donations or checks. Another really great thing just besides your treasure is to donate your time or your talent. We really need a grant writer. We need somebody who can take this to the next step up. We kind of got fundraising going and we're okay with that. We really need a grant writer.
So a check or cash delivered to you or mailed to you, made out to Stream Anchorage?
That's correct. Stream Anchorage, as opposed to Anchorage Stream Academy, which is the school.
Yes.
The nonprofit is Stream Anchorage, and that's who you'd want to make the check out to.
And I would say to anyone who's listening, watching this later, which might sound funny for the principal to say, I really, our school is, our budget is well balanced and well managed. And so when I get asked about donating money and financial contributions, I would actually, I'll never say no to people donating to the school, but I would actually steer anyone that wants to support Stream to the nonprofit. Schools have budgets. I'm required to submit a balanced budget and manage that budget. So we're okay. But if somebody really wanted to make a donation and support Stream as the principal of the school, I would really encourage you to look towards our nonprofit.
And then remember, we have mugs to sell.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sylvia. That was great. And it's impressive to see you put on different hats. I mean, I think everyone knows how many hats you wear, but just as the admin assistant alone, that job as an employee of the school is so many hats, because we don't have a registrar, we don't have a secretary, we don't have a nurse. And someday we'll grow to a point where we add some more positions, but really Sylvia does all of those things. And it's in a lot of ways, it's the hardest job at Stream, and it's really amazing. But then in addition to that, she wears the hat of being a member of our APC, and she wears the hat, an additional hat of being, involved in our nonprofit and on the nonprofit board. So I think maybe somebody figured out cloning, and there might be 3 Sylvias, and we just only see one at a time, because otherwise I don't honestly know, as somebody who prides themselves on their work ethic and multitasking and working 24/7, 365, I don't know how you do all of this. And I don't say that about many other people, but
my kids are grown up now. Now I have all this time to invest. This is the school that I wanted for my kids. And it couldn't happen in time. Like, they're adults now, but I'm going to make sure, I so strongly believe in the mission and vision of Anchorage Stream Academy, that I'm going to make sure that this opportunity is available to all of our kids in East Anchorage.
It's funny, we say something really similar about our passion for Stream, you and I. You say this is the school you wanted for your kids, and I often say this is the school I wanted growing up. This is what I needed when I was in middle school. I grew up outdoors. I grew up doing things with, reading voraciously and loving learning, but really bored and constrained when I had to sit in a desk all day and, kind of go lockstep with everyone else. And I learned best by being outdoors and by making and building and doing. And the things I remember from my public school education mostly are things that were projects and that were interactive and hands-on. Like, this is the school I needed. This is the school I would have dreamed up if I was in middle school. And This is the school you would have dreamed up if you could have the perfect school for your children. So I think we have that common piece. Thank you so much, Sylvia. That was really cool. This is our final morning coffee. Wow. Anything else before we wrap up for today that folks want to touch base on?
Well, we do have the morning coffee survey that's out there. So we would hope that we could get some more data so that the morning coffee can actually serve our community to the best extent. That survey can be found in a couple of places. It's on our Facebook page, and it's also now on the front page of our website. So pass the word, make sure that people can do, and now it's in our chat box.
I just put it in the chat box, and I'm going to put it on the, to be fair, I'm also going to put it right now in the chat box on YouTube. So I just shared the link 2 ways. We have 16 responses, which is a pretty good response rate so far. 16 responses, and we're just trying to gather some data on, I kept saying if we're going to continue morning coffee, and Mrs. Bionich keeps correcting me, saying we are continuing morning coffee. It's data on the best way to do that, like how many days per week. We had 2 days a week for a while, and now we're doing 1 day a week. It seems like the survey so far leans really heavily towards 1 time per week. What day of the week works best? Is Wednesday best? Right now, 12 respondents, 75% of the respondents have chosen Wednesday, which is the highest. What topics would you like to see? And that type of thing. I think right now what we're looking at is Wednesday, 1 day a week, continuing to bring in relevant topics and presenters like we have. I think the biggest question for me is the time. Do we do this at 8 a.m. or do we bump it up to 9 a.m.? And the survey, unfortunately, well, I mean, not unfortunately, but the survey has not given us a really clear answer to that right now, because you can pick multiple choices on that question. Right now, we have 50-50, an even split between current time 8 to 9 and 9 and then 9 to 10.
Oh, so that means 8:30.
And the other big question for me is, do we do this after school starts, and how? And so I guess that's a good way to look at it. Once school starts, I can't do it at 8 a.m. because I'm standing at the front door and then launching kids to class at 8 a.m. But I could go sit down in my office 1 day a week, close the door, log in, and do this at 8:30 or at 9 possibly. So those are just some questions moving forward. If anyone has suggestions, ideas on presenters, topics, and things when we come back in July, please let us know, and we'll get those scheduled. Awesome. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Any final comments before we say goodbye until July?
A quick reminder that we have our 501c3 meeting tonight, or no, our APC meeting tonight. And our 501c3 meeting on Saturday. So tonight you can watch us on YouTube, and then on Saturday, if you're interested in the nonprofit arm, you can give me a call and I'll get you connected on Zoom.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Representative Pruitt, for joining us today. Thank you, Mrs. Bionich, and our members of our 501c3. Thanks for being here with us today. And that's it for morning coffee.